All right, guys, so a different video today and something that I've wanted to do for a while, but I just found a really good resource to get this Rams draft study done. And special shout out to Jack Lichtenstein for his jacklick10.com website, where he took consensus big boards and essentially compared based on where each player was drafted, going all the way back to 2016. While I could talk about 2016, we're going to just focus on every single Rams draft they've had in the Sean McVay and Les Snead era. So that's 2017 to now. And I'm going to get your thoughts in the comment section after this thing, but I'm also going to give my thoughts based on my findings. I thought this was really fascinating because I think the whole point of this is that we constantly hear how the Rams reached. I'll say it, Alexis will say it during the live stream, but did they reach? And honestly, is that a bad thing? We'll get into it. Before we do, be sure to like, subscribe, and comment. Also, be sure to follow me on all social media at JKBogan, including Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, and Kick. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So let's dive into it. We're going to start off with 2017 here. Now, I want you guys to know that there was a cumulative grade. It's going to be a plus or minus. So ultimately, it's going to be a net number based on how much value they got or how little value they got in that said draft. We'll start off with 2017, the first draft, the one that ruled them all because they got the best player in the Sean McVay and Les Snead era that they drafted in Cooper Kupp. But was he the best value pick? This is where it gets interesting, folks, because it's not necessarily, this was telling us about consensus mock drafts and big boards. So where players were ranked based on draft experts and draft analysis. However, I have taken the liberty to go through and add all the games and starts that each player played. So we have how much, a plus or a minus, how much of a value pick or not value pick each pick was. But we also have games and starts to show, in a way, production. So 2017, the Rams had a minus 182. What does that mean? It means combined, every single player they chose in this draft, and they chose 8 players in this 2017 draft, they had a minus 182 differential based on where in big boards consensus that they were falling. So we start off with 244, second round, 44th overall. The first pick in the McVay era was South Alabama tight end Gerald Everett, who had a minus 15 value. That means the Rams picked him 15 spots earlier than the consensus boards would have had him. He ended up playing 61 games for the Rams and only 11 starts. So was he a bust? Maybe, but he did play 61 games. And those starts are a little unfair because, of course, he was playing alongside Tyler Higbee, and Higbee gets credit for pretty much all those starts. So that is worth mentioning. Then at pick third round, 69th overall, the Rams select Cooper Kupp, who ended up going on to win the Triple Crown and being an all-time Ram and one of the best tight end or one of the best wide receivers in football. Now, I know he's not on the Rams anymore, but Cooper Kupp's career was insane with the Rams. 104 games, 89 starts, about as good a value as you're going to find. But they got a 0 on this one because the Rams drafted him at 69th overall, and that is exactly where boards had him, the 69th overall player per consensus boards. That's interesting. Then at pick 91 in the third round, Boston College safety John Johnson, who goes on to play in 73 games for the Rams and 57 starts, had a minus 34, meaning the Rams essentially took him 34 spots earlier than he was supposed to, according to consensus big boards. Texas A&M wide receiver Josh Reynolds at pick 117 in the fourth round received a plus 14 grade here because the Rams took him 14 spots after he was supposed to be picked, according to these boards. That's 64 games with the Rams and 24 key starts for them when Cooper Kupp went down with injury, Robert Woods went down with injury, and of course, you had Brandon Cooks. So I think they got a lot of, play out of Josh Reynolds, a fourth round wide receiver, ended up being a pretty good bargain for them. Now, 125 in the fourth round, Samson Ebukam. This is where it gets fascinating. Eastern Washington edge defender, 64 games, 35 starts. But where did consensus big boards have him? 174 picks lower than where the Rams took him at 125. So that's saying something there. Basically, they didn't think he was going to be drafted, and the Rams took him early on day 3. He ended up, as I said, starting 35 games and having a pretty solid career, all things aside, for the Los Angeles Rams. Pick 189 in the 6th round, however, out of Tulane, defensive lineman Tanzel Smart. I know the draft community really liked him. I liked him as well. 31 games with the Rams, only 4 starts. He had a plus 49 grade. So boards liked Tanzel Smart more than apparently the Rams liked him in this draft. They got him 49 spots later than he was supposed to go. And it's kind of interesting because some of the other guys, well, you got a negative 174 from Samson Ebukam, who ends up starting 35 games. You got a plus 49. This is great value according to consensus big boards. However, Tanzel Smart's role with the Rams was short-lived. Then you have 206 in the 6th round, Virginia Tech fullback Sam Rogers. Big boards had this as a minus 78. The Rams probably drafted somebody that was going to go undrafted, and then he eventually did not make it onto the 53-man roster that year. And following that was Ewan Price, the Pittsburgh edge defender, undersized at 5'11", but had some juice. Now, he was well-liked in the draft community, a plus 56 on consensus big boards. The Rams drafted him 56 spots after he was supposed to go, according to them. He only played 1 game for the Rams. So what do we take away from, the consensus in 2017? Well, it is funny. The best value pick was Ewan Price. And then the second best value pick was Tanzel Smart. The worst value pick was Samson Ebukam. Ewan Price and Sam Rogers combined, Ewan Price and Tanzel Smart combined set up 32 games, and they were considered really good value picks according to the consensus board. Well, Samson Ebukam ended up starting 35 games. So he started more games than the games that Ewan Price and Tanzel Smart appeared in combined for the Rams, and that was given the worst value at a negative 174. Do consensus boards matter? Well, we're learning. But in 2017, the Rams picked Cooper Kupp right where he was supposed to be picked. And obviously that ended up being great, but he absolutely played better than a 69th overall player. John Johnson was supposed to be picked after the top 100. Negative 34. The Rams picked him earlier than consensus boards. He ended up starting 57 games for them, and he came down with the game-sealing interception to send the Rams to the Super Bowl. So say what you will, but John Johnson and Cooper Kupp were integral parts of this team, and these are guys that were drafted and played way above their 3rd-round grade. As far as Gerald Everett's concerned, a negative 15 puts him just inside that 3rd round. I would say that's pretty fair considering he didn't have a bad career with the Rams, but it was disappointing considering that was the first pick of the Sean McVay era. In addition to that, Josh Reynolds pretty much played the part. I would say he played like a 3rd round pick. And then Samson Ebukam, I think, outplayed his 4th round draft status. Or not 4th round, undrafted draft status. So interesting, but so far, 2017, I would say that the consensus board really kind of was misleading there. In 2018, the Rams had one of the biggest reaches you'll ever see combined, a cumulative grade of negative 532. At pick 89 in the 3rd round, Joe Noteboom was drafted by the Rams, 33 picks higher than the consensus board. He went on to play 71 games and start 35 of them. And to be fair, while he wasn't the best, he's definitely somebody that made it to another contract. They liked him a lot, and he gave him plenty of value that a 3rd round pick should give you. A late 3rd round pick, nonetheless. Interesting. Then at pick 111 in the 4th round, a guy by the name of Brian Allen, who would go on to start in the Super Bowl win for the Rams years later. he was picked in 2018. They gave him a negative 98 cumulative value. So very interesting here. They had Brian Allen way down the board, and the Rams selected him 98 picks earlier than he was supposed to. He goes on to start 32 games, play in 50, and win a Super Bowl for the Los Angeles Rams. At pick 135, Stephen F. Austin edge John Franklin Myers looked like the gem of the draft. But it looked as though the Rams drafted somebody they felt was super underrated and was a steal in not sort of steal territory. They ended up picking him 134 spots before he was supposed to be picked, according to these consensus boards. As you guys know, if you've been following me since the beginning, I was a huge fan of John Franklin Myers. He ended up going on to win the Rams Rookie of the Year, and he played in all 16 games, and he even strip-sacked Tom Brady in the Super Bowl. He did not play another game for the Rams. God knows why. They really messed up on that one. Not that it matters anymore, but John Franklin Myers, I would say, worked out. I think the Rams just made a mistake in cutting him, but negative 134, that's wild. Next up was Micah Kiser. Kiser was drafted 147th in the 5th round. Of course, consensus boards had him 5 picks lower. Not really a huge deal. 26 games, 9 starts. That's pretty good value out of a 5th round pick. And then Oklahoma edge Obo Okoronkwo at 160 in the 5th round, who played in 33 games. No starts, but he was important in the rotation. They gave the Rams essentially a plus 79. He was picked 79 spots after he should have been picked. And I remember at the time, I felt that way as well. I had a really high grade on Obo Okoronkwo, and I could not believe the Rams were able to get him in the 5th round. I had him in my mock drafts. Then in the 6th round, 176, they took Tennessee running back John Kelly 57 spots later than the consensus boards had him. He only played 8 games. Then you had Maine offensive tackle Jamil Demby, who had essentially been picked 71 spots too early, according to Next Gen, consensus boards. 6 games, 1 start, not a really big contributor, stayed a lot of the time on that practice squad, but there you have it. And this one is fascinating. You'll get a kick out of this one. At pick 195 in the 6th round, the Rams took Rutgers defensive lineman Sebastian Joseph Day, who had a negative 152. So that means the Rams picked him 152 spots earlier than he was supposed to. Well, he went on to start just about every game with the Rams that he could. 39 games, 38 starts, was a key contributor in the middle of the defense, and ended up as one of the better draft picks of this class. Louisville edge defender Trayvon Young was picked 8 spots earlier than they expected. He went 205 in the 6th round, only played in 2 games. 7th round, 231 overall. The Rams selected TCU linebacker Traven Howard, negative 186, 29 games, 2 starts, and a huge interception to send the Rams to the Super Bowl, which they would end up winning. Very interesting here because negative 186, that put him like way priority free agent, definitely not getting drafted. And Traven Howard ended up being a contributor on that defense. And then at pick 244 in the 7th round, SMU edge defender Justin Lawler was picked 19 spots earlier than consensus boards had him, or later than consensus boards had him. He played in 19 games. So what do you take away from this? In 2018, the best value pick, according to that board, was Obo Okoronkwo at plus 79, and then John Kelly at plus 57. Kelly was barely on the team, and Okoronkwo ended up having a nice little career with the Rams as a rotational guy. The worst value was John Franklin Myers, who went on to become a very good player with the Jets, and then was traded to the Broncos and became a very good player for them and still is with them. And then you had Sebastian Joseph Day, who was really key and critical in the middle of the defense, and then Traven Howard, who again was critical to go to the Super Bowl and that Super Bowl season. So interesting stuff here. The value pick, John Kelly, obviously Okoronkwo panned out, but Kelly only played in 8 games. Really interesting here. Overall, I would say the best, whether you agree or not, Joe Noteboom being in 71 games for the Rams, being around as long as he was probably the best value of this draft. In the 3rd round, They gave him a negative 33. To me, I think Noteboom is probably the head of this class. He was drafted first, and I would say Brian Allen is right there, and then Sebastian Joseph Day. John Franklin Myers could have been, but they cut him early. We move on to 2019. Interesting stuff so far, but we move on to 2019 here. A cumulative negative 95. So you go back to 2017, and now this is essentially the least that they have ever reached on players. So at round two, 61st overall, after a trade down with the Atlanta Falcons, the Rams select Taylor Rapp, safety out of Washington, and they selected him 24 spots after he was supposed to go. He ends up playing 57 games, 48 starts. While I felt like he was disappointing, in reality, he really was a good pick for them, and he made sense. Maybe he was more of a third rounder, but a late second, you can't really complain where they got him. He ended up being a key contributor for their secondary, and while there were high hopes for him to become a really, really good safety, he still ended up being decent. So Taylor Rapp, I would say that was definitely fair. And then at pick 70, the Rams traded up to get Darrell Henderson, the running back out of Memphis, in the third round. Consensus boards had him 5 spots below that. 54 games, 32 starts. Kind of misleading because he split time with Cam Akers, but Henderson was a model of consistency for this team when they asked him. He was, stellar in pass protection, utilized out of the backfield. He had some key and critical catches in the Super Bowl where they probably don't win without him. So say what you will, but Darrell Henderson, I think, definitely paid his dues as a third-round pick. And I probably would say he was the headline of this draft as far as who made the most impact, who was the best value. I would say Darrell Henderson with his 54 games, 32 starts, and having some really key contribution in the running back room. Then at pick 79 in the third round, Michigan cornerback David Long Jr., 52 games, 10 starts. They gave him a +1, meaning the Rams got him one pick after the consensus boards had him. So they had him at 78. The Rams got him at 79. Obviously, we know he went on to have a pretty solid career with the Rams. Didn't get utilized a ton, but he did play in 52 games. He just didn't start that often until that final season. Oklahoma offensive tackle Bobby Evans at pick 97 in the third round. Bobby Evans, that was a negative 15. I felt like that was a reach at the time as well. The consensus board didn't love it. 35 games, 12 starts. Bobby Evans was not very good with the Rams, but he did start 12 games to be fair. So it's not like he didn't play any games like some guys will be on this list. He ended up just not working out for the Rams. So he wasn't really worth the third round pick, but I don't hate the negative 15. Then you have pick 134 in the fourth round, Greg Gaines, defensive lineman out of Washington. Rams get him at a -10, 59 games, 25 starts. I thought he had a pretty good Rams career, really started to come into his own at the end of his contract, and unfortunately was not brought back. But I would definitely say he was worth that pick. Wisconsin offensive lineman David Edwards, who I had a second round grade on, 5th round, 169th overall. He got a +47, and rightfully so. This was kind of one of those insane picks that we see where David Edwards should not have fallen this far, but the Rams got him 53 games, 45 starts, very key down the stretch of his career, and he eventually went on to go and join Aaron Cromer with the Buffalo Bills and is still there, but he was a really good pick for the Rams in the 5th round. 7th round, 243. This one will blow your mind. Nick Scott, Penn State safety, special teams ace, -144, played 64 games with the Rams, started his last season of his Rams career, 17 starts. Look, Nick Scott, the consensus boards had him 144 picks, lower than 243, meaning there was no business for him to be drafted. Rams took him, reached, but they got probably their 4th best pick in this class and an eventual starter in the 7th round. And then they wrapped up that draft with pick 251 overall, a guy that was a fan favorite early on. A lot of people were high on him. Even the consensus boards thought they gave him +7. picked him a little earlier than, later than he was supposed to go. Texas Tech linebacker Dakota Allen. He would never play a regular season game for the Rams. Played 0 games plus 7. And based on the value, the best value pick was David Edwards at plus 47. The worst was Nick Scott at minus 144. So the consensus board really did not like the Nick Scott pick, but he goes on to end up being a key contributor in the secondary and special teams. So interesting stuff there. And of course, Darrell Henderson had the negative thing there. I would say he was probably the best on that draft class, him or Taylor Rapp. David Edwards was 3rd. Nick Scott was 4th. And Greg Gaines also got a negative. He was 5th. So interesting stuff there. Then we move on to 2020. The Rams got a cumulative grade of negative 392 in this draft. So a lot of reaching according to them at 252. So second round, 52nd overall. Florida State running back Cam Akers became a Ram. -6. So they said they picked him a little early. 30 games, 15 starts. Unfortunately, he had the dreaded Achilles tear that, was absolutely terrible. He came back from, but he really wasn't the same until really the end of that career with the Rams. Then Connor Williams eventually took over, and he wanted out. At pick 57 in the second round, Florida wide receiver Van Jefferson was considered a 40-point reach by consensus big boards. He went on to have 49 games played, 30 starts. In a way, it was a little disappointing because of the injuries, and he didn't really get a chance to emerge into that starting receiver. Second round, you want your receivers to, of course, be starters long-term if you can. That did not happen, but I think the 40-pick reach, I just disagreed with that. I thought he was picked where he was supposed to be. In the third round, pick 84, the consensus big boards really like Terrell Lewis here, Alabama edge defender, plus 31. He ended up playing only 30 games and 7 starts, had a lot of issues with injuries going into the draft, coming out of the draft, and so really, I think he went where he was supposed to go. I didn't look at this as this was some big steal. Didn't see a second round grade on him, but the consensus big boards had a plus 31 on him. I don't think he matched up to that. Then at pick 104 in the third round, was really high on him, had a second round grade on him. Utah safety Terrell Burgess, plus 22. They said that this was a steal, essentially. Not like a big time steal. Plus 22 is good, though. 30 games, only 3 starts, dealt with some injuries, never really got the opportunity because they drafted Jordan Fuller in this class. But that's what they had there. And then Purdue tight end Bryson Hopkins also got a plus 22. The Rams drafted him 136th overall in the 4th round. He ended up playing in 39 games, only 1 start. The thing that made Bryson Hopkins' career with the Rams was 100% his play out of nowhere when they need him the most in the Super Bowl. They do not win without Bryson Hopkins, as crazy as that sounds. I thought he was going to be a stud. I thought he could be their long-term tight end. I don't really ever feel like they gave him a shot. We'll never know what happened, but plus 22, they said the Rams got a bargain with him. And then at 199 in the 6th round, the Tom Brady pick, who would go on to intercept Tom Brady not once but twice, Ohio State safety Jordan Fuller, who ended up being a very good starter for the Rams, an above-average starter. -58. They said this was a reach, the biggest reach so far in the draft. 48 games, 46 starts, just really kind of played his tail off from the get-go and stole the job. So I honestly think that's one of the better picks the Rams have ever made. I thought Fuller, captain, physical, ball hawk, really liked watching him play football with the Rams. So that was a hell of a pick. Then at pick 234 in the 7th round, they got Baylor linebacker Clay Johnston, who ended up getting a -57, never played a game. He was cut. They want to get him on the practice squad, and he ended up signing with the Panthers to be with his dad, who was on the coaching staff. So Clay Johnston never really played for the Rams after that. And then pick 248, Miami of Ohio, kicker Sam Sloman, a -326. And now look, consensus big boards always have the special teamers way off their board. Like they're way down, right? Sam Sloman, negative 326, was on point. I did not understand this pick. There were so many better kickers. I really hated this pick when it happened. He played in 7 games, and honestly, I think a lot of Rams fans wish he hadn't played in any of those games. Really struggled, and then never really got going in the NFL. So a reach in the 7th round. If there was one, it was Sam Sloman. And then at pick 250, Clemson offensive lineman Tremaine Ankrum got a plus 20. I had a 4th rounder on Ankrum. I loved the player, was really excited to get him. 31 games, 1 start. I thought that was really good value for them. In this draft, the best value pick, according to consensus boards, was Terrell Lewis, who didn't really end up doing anything. Terrell Burgess, who unfortunately didn't really end up doing anything, and Bryson Hopkins, who unfortunately only was able to really get going in the Super Bowl. They didn't really let him play. And the worst value was Sam Sloman. That checks out. We move on to 2021. This was the biggest reach of any consensus-wise to this point, negative 750. So a lot of reaches according to consensus boards, but how did we look out? Well, let's see here. So 257. So second round, 57th overall. Louisville wide receiver Tutu Atwell. So not long after they just picked Van Jefferson, a year later, they picked Tutu Atwell with that same exact pick, another wide receiver. They gave him a negative 34, meaning this was a reach. I thought so at the time as well. I do like Tutu Atwell a lot, though. 54 games, 23 starts. I think the Rams have really held him back, but I'm glad he's back for another year. However, they do think that this was a reach. Moving on, we have 103 in the 3rd round, South Carolina linebacker Ernest Jones. They said this was a reach as well. Consensus boards had him 71 picks lower than where the Rams took him. 47 games, 33 starts until the injury and, of course, the contracts and everything. Ernest Jones looked like a heart and soul type of player for the Rams, and it was sad to see him go. Clearly, consensus got this one wrong. At pick 4th round, 117, Texas A&M defensive lineman Bobby Brown III, who just left the Rams in free agency, negative 3. He had 49 games and 30 starts. I think that this is pretty much on par. He was a 4th round pick. The Rams took him. Negative doesn't really matter because it's a negative 3. It's not like a negative 30. So I think that makes sense. And then 4th round, 130, Central Arkansas cornerback Robert Rochelle got a plus 11. Only played in 28 games and 5 starts. And then Jacob Harris, UCF tight end, played in 16 games, only had 1 catch for 6 yards in his Rams career, was picked 141st in the 4th round. He had a negative 113 grade. I do agree with this. I felt like he was a late 3rd round late day 3 flyer that the Rams took on early day 3. So that was a little surprising there. Negative 113, and he didn't really end up doing much of anything in the league, aside from the Rams as well. At pick 174 in the 5th round, Northwestern edge Ernest Brown IV got a negative 135. So the Rams took him 135 picks earlier than he was supposed to go. 12 games, 3 starts. This was a draft that I didn't love. I liked, at the time I liked Ernest Jones. I really didn't love this draft. I liked Robert Rochelle. I was kind of indifferent about Bobby Brown. He ended up being a friend of mine and everything. But at the time, same thing with Tutu Atwell. I thought they reached on him, ended up really liking him after the fact. But yeah, this was not a very good draft, right? So Ernest Brown IV thought that was a huge reach. And then I hated the pick of Jake Funk out of Maryland. I just did not get that pick at all. At 233, they took him. Consensus boards had him 128 lower. That's pretty much where I did not think he was a draftable prospect. Ended up playing 15 games, but he didn't really carry the ball much at all for the Rams and did not start. So there's that. Then at pick 249 in the 7th round, the Rams took Notre Dame big-bodied wide receiver Ben Skoranek. He was essentially taken 108 picks earlier than he was supposed to be picked. I understand it to a degree. This was probably a UDFA that they really wanted. He ended up having a pretty good career, all things considered. 45 games, 12 starts for the Rams. Had some really good moments. Was sad to see him go. Did win a Super Bowl with the Rams. But yeah, and then 252 in the 7th round, Concordia St. Paul. Edge defender Chris Garrett. I had high hopes for him. I think this is when the Rams stopped taking the small school guys. Negative 169. They thought this was a reach. One game he played for the Rams, and that was it. So really disappointing there, but he was also a seventh rounder, so not that disappointing either. 2022, a bigger set of reaches. Interesting, right? So going back to that, the best value pick in 2021 was Robert Rochelle. The worst was Chris Garrett. Now in 2022, this is where it gets really interesting because they did not have a pick early on. They picked in the third round, 104, and they took Wisconsin offensive lineman Logan Bruss. Negative 78 was the grade there. Consensus board said they took him 78 picks earlier. I tend to agree with that. I thought this was kind of a reach. I understood it after the fact, but he didn't end up being what I thought he could be when I finally went back. I watched the full tape, watched like 10 games of his, got excited, and then he had the injury and just never really did anything. 8 games, 3 starts, and he's gone. Fourth round, 142 overall. They took South Carolina State cornerback Kobe Durant, who is still on this roster, is still one of the better corners on this roster, has had a really good career with the Rams, all things considered, 44 games, 24 starts. They said that he was taking 115 picks early. I got to disagree on that one. Then in the fifth round, 164 overall, the Rams took Notre Dame running back Kyren Williams. And while they gave him a plus 25, I think it should have been a lot higher. I thought Kyren Williams was one of the best running backs in this draft, and I think he fell because of stupid testing that I didn't really care about. Kyren Williams has once again proven that with 2 straight 1,000-yard seasons and over 30-plus touchdowns. So, 38 games, 27 starts. Kyren got off to a rocky start because of the injury on the kickoff of his first ever game, but after that, he has really bounced back, and he has emerged as one of the better young running backs in the National Football League. So, love that pick. They traded up to get him with the Raiders. I'll never forget it. In round 6, pick 211, UCLA safety Quentin Lake, negative 85. Love this pick. I had him mocked the entire time to the Rams, and he ended up playing 40 games and 20 starts to this point. He is a captain. He's a leader. He's going to be, once again, playing a lot of games this year, and he could be working his way into a potential contract extension down the road. They gave him an 85, a negative 85. I disagree. I think he was definitely worthy of being drafted, and I love that the Rams did it, and I think the Rams love that they did it too. At 235 in the 7th, they took Montana State edge Daniel Hardy. Really liked this player. He had a really, really good work ethic. He fit the team. It just never really worked out. Only 6 games. Minus 425. So according to that, this is the biggest reach the Rams ever had. But it's silly because when you think about it, it was a 7th round pick. You can take whoever you want in the 7th round. I think a lot of people forget that. At pick 253, Kansas State safety Russ Yeast got a negative 216. But he ended up playing in 33 games and had 10 starts. He's no longer on the Rams, but still think the pick was definitely worth it to get the value that they got out of a 7th rounder. You'll take that all day. And last but certainly not least, a guy who's still on the roster, Michigan State offensive tackle A.J. Arcuri, got a negative 126, but is still on the roster and has played 10 games and has had a start. So, best value pick in this draft, according to the consensus boards, was a player that I totally forgot to mention in Darion Kendrick. Darion Kendrick was the best, and the worst was Daniel Hardy. So Daniel Hardy minus 425, which is kind of insane. That was considered the worst, and the best, of course, was Darion Kendrick, and they had him 67, plus 67. Darion Kendrick was a guy before that season was being mocked in the first round, so I get it. I wasn't as high on him, but I liked him enough to draft him when they got him in the 6th round. So, interesting draft when you look at it. A negative 953, but you come away with a starter in Kobe Durant, one of the better running backs in football in Kyren Williams, one of the better safeties in football in Quentin Lake, and a starter in Russ Yeast for a little bit. It's interesting. It's very interesting. I don't think it's the best draft ever, and I do think the Rams learned from the 2021 and 2022 draft. They started changing up their archetypes, and I think that's when you really started to see them kind of hit their stride in 2023 and 2024. So we'll start with that. 2023, a negative 331 cumulative value, right? So they reached a lot according to the consensus draft. So interestingly enough, they started off at 36th overall in the second round. TCU offensive lineman Steve Avila, who did not fit their usual archetype for an offensive lineman, a really big mauler type of guard / center, and it ended up working out for them. Now negative 13 is what the consensus boards had, but he started every game he's played in, 27 of them. He dealt with an injury last year, but started every single game of his rookie year, and they're excited about him long term. At pick 77 in the third round, they took Tennessee edge defender Byron Young, who got a negative 6. To me, I don't really get it. I think that's exactly where he was at, or he was a little bit higher. Regardless, it's only a negative 6. Not anything to freak out about. Played in 34 games, 32 starts to this point. Byron Young has been very, very important for this team. And that also is followed by 12 picks later. They go with Wake Forest defensive lineman Kobe Turner. And consensus boards did not like that. A negative 66. They thought this was a significant reach here. 34 games, 20 starts, doesn't really do it service. This is somebody that should have won Defensive Rookie of the Year. He was snubbed by, but he has been huge for the Rams, taking up the mantle of trying to replace Aaron Donald as the leader in the middle. He's done a great job of that. So he could be looking at a long-term deal. They can say negative 66 all they want, but I think the Rams feel really good about that value. To be fair, I did think they reached on him at the time, but this is what goes to show you, right? At pick 128 in the fourth round, they took Georgia quarterback Stetson Bennett, who was considered a 105 pick reach according to consensus boards. He has never played a regular season game. He's probably going to be somebody that plays in the preseason. I don't see them keeping 3 quarterbacks. If they do, he's probably going to be on the practice squad. I don't expect Stetson Bennett to really be anything in this league. I had high hopes. I don't know why, but I did. I ended up liking his film more than I thought. I tend to agree with the negative 105 there for Stetson Bennett. Then at 161, the fifth round, I thought they absolutely stole Nick Hampton out of App State, the edge defender. The consensus boards thought they stole him a little bit, a plus 13. He's played in 24 games. Unfortunately, he suffered a season-ending injury. I don't know what the deal will be with Nick Hampton. Is he ever going to reach that ceiling? Not sure, but in the fifth round, it is what it is. At 174 in the fifth round, because they had 4 fifth-round picks, they got Georgia offensive lineman Warren McClendon Jr., a plus 16 cumulative consensus board grade here. 16 games, 5 starts. I think he's definitely been worth the price there. A fifth-round pick and a guy that gives you some starts and some added stability on that offensive line, I think makes a lot of sense. And then the next pick at 175, they had Clemson tight end Davis Allen, plus 7. So I thought this was a great value as well. I had a third-round grade on Davis Allen. Really liked him. 30 games, 6 starts. Kind of fell back a little bit last year, but has shown him some good things. And then, of course, last but not least in the fifth round at 177, it was BYU wide receiver Puka Nacua, who consensus boards had him 8 picks higher than he was supposed to go. 28 games, 28 starts, maybe the best wide receiver in football when healthy. Yeah, I would say that they feel totally fine picking him 8 picks earlier than where the consensus had him going. In the sixth round, they had 3 sixth-round picks. Nebraska edge defender O'Shawn Mathis at a negative 55. He went on to only play 8 games. At 182, the Rams also got Trey Tomlinson, who just left the team, plus 80, so it was considered a very, very good pick. I remember I felt the same way at the time as well. 15 games he played. He's gone now. Ole Miss running back Zach Evans was considered a massive steal in this one, a plus 100 here. He was the 115th overall player on consensus boards, but only played 10 games and only had 6 carries for the Rams, or 9 carries, I believe. So, that interesting, right? In the seventh round, Wingate punter Ethan Evans had a negative 254 grade there. He ends up being their punter. He started 33 games. He's been one of the better punters in the league. I think they're okay with reaching on him there. And then at pick 234, they went with Oklahoma State safety Jason Taylor II, who was considered a 3-pick reach. Only played 8 games. He is no longer on the roster. And then at pick 259, Mr. Irrelevant, Toledo defensive lineman Desjuan Johnson was picked 37 picks ahead of where he was supposed to, according to Consensus Boards, which I don't get because I thought this guy was a third-round talent. Absolutely loved when they picked him. He's playing 21 games, hasn't started, but he's been a contributor in that rotation. I think the funny thing here is when you look at 2023, it was a really good draft class. You come away with Puka Nacua, Kobe Turner, Byron Young, Steve Avila, Ethan Evans, 5 guys that are all really key contributors and really key starters. And this is a minus 331 point reach, right? The best value pick was Zach Evans, who was barely on the team. And the worst value pick was the guy with the last name Evans, Ethan Evans, who is a key and critical punter for them. Now, since, of course, as I mentioned, special teamers always get ranked lower. You're not going to rank Josh Carty number 1 overall. Stetson Bennett would be the next man up there. So in a way, that value does make a lot of sense. Doesn't look like a great pick right now with Stetson Bennett, but this draft class, I think a lot of Rams fans love. This next one, I know a lot of Rams fans love at 2024. Believe it or not, this is the first draft class the Rams had going all the way back to 2017 where they had a plus grade, meaning they did not, cumulative grade, they did not reach as a whole on their draft class. So really fascinating how the first draft class that they had that they didn't reach on ended up being arguably their best. Maybe. Well, 2023 was pretty damn good. But looking at it, the best value pick was Bo Limmer. The worst value pick was Joshua Carty / Jordan Whittington. At pick 19 in the first round, Florida State edge defender Jared Verse was picked 3 spots higher than, 3 spots after the consensus. So a +3 there for Jared Verse, ends up going on and winning Defensive Rookie of the Year. Then at pick 239, round 2, 39th overall pick, Florida State defensive lineman Braden Fisk, they trade up 12 spots to get. They said that was a 5-pick reach. However, he played 17 games, really, really key contributor, 8 starts, was a great player, and got some votes in Defensive Rookie of the Year. Then you have at pick 83 in the 3rd round, you have Michigan running back Blake Corum, who was picked 4 picks later than he was supposed to, according to Consensus Boards. 17 games, only 1 start, and then unfortunately suffers the season-ending injury in the postseason. Blake Corum, the jury's still out on him. Some people think that wasn't really much of a need, but was it a reach? I don't really think so. I think that's where he was going to go. At pick 99 in the 3rd round, Miami safety Cam Kinchins generates a +23 for the Rams, and that's 17 games that he's played in, 4 starts. He was really key and critical for a couple of those games that they would have lost had he not had that ball production. They obviously feel really good about his future. No picks in the 4th round because of the Kevin Dotson trade. So in the 5th round, at 154, they took Washington State edge defender Brennan Jackson. He got a +6 from the Consensus Board. 7 games he played in. He had 1 start, of course, the last game of the year. Excited about his long-term future. I do agree, right around this time is where he would have gone. In the 6th round at 196, Clemson defensive lineman Tyler Davis, who I was absolutely wrong on. I did not like this pick at the time. I know only a 6th rounder, but you have your guys and all that. Tyler Davis had a great year. They said he was picked 53 picks earlier or later than he was supposed to be, and he played in all 16 games and was a key contributor in the run game and also had some pass rushing ability that he displayed. So I'm excited for his long-term potential. And then at pick 209 in the 6th round, Stanford kicker Josh Carty, a -76. So not as high as some of the other special teamers, but still Rams get really good value with him. Was, of course, one of the best kickers in the league last year. Really important for them. Looks like an absolute stud moving forward. And then at pick 213, Texas wide receiver Jordan Whittington, who I was ecstatic for. I thought he was a great fit for the Rams. They gave him a -30, 15 games, 3 starts. I don't hate it. I get it. I just personally wouldn't have given him a -30 here. I don't think he was the 243rd best prospect in the draft, but that's just me. At pick 217, I think we all knew this was coming. Bo Limmer still doesn't make any sense to this day how he fell this far down the draft. They have him at a plus 95. I'd say even higher than that. Arkansas center Bo Limmer, 16 games, 14 starts. Really, really good season. I understand it didn't end the way he was hoping for, but he was great down the stretch, and he was really important for this team to have some stability at a really important center position. And then I picked 254, Kansas State offensive lineman KT Leviston, who never got a chance. They like this, though. The consensus board said he was picked 61 spots after he was supposed to be picked. He didn't play in any games because he was on IR, but I'm excited for the future with him. And then, last but not least, we have the 2025 class. The best value pick, according to consensus boards, was Chris Paul Jr. The worst was Terrence Ferguson. So, at pick 46th overall in the second round, Oregon tight end Terrence Ferguson netted the Rams a negative 55. The cumulative grade was negative 67 for this draft class, so it's the lowest it's been. The lowest the negative has been aside from last year. So back-to-back years and the least that they've ever reached on players. That's really fascinating. At pick 3 in the third round at 90 overall, you have Michigan edge Josiah Stewart. They said that the Rams got a steal. I do agree. A plus 18 for Josiah Stewart. I would even say it was probably higher for me, but plus 18 nonetheless. And then at pick 117 in the fourth round, the Rams took Jarquez Hunter, running back out of Auburn. They gave him a negative 40. And then at 148 in the fifth round, the trade up, giving up a fourth rounder next year, they got Tyler Davis, and consensus boards had him 12 picks after where the Rams drafted him. But at pick 172 in the fifth round, the Rams traded back up to get Chris Paul Jr., the linebacker out of Ole Miss. I'm a lot higher on him than the consensus. The consensus had him as a 102 overall player, so a plus 70 addition there for the Rams. And then in the seventh round, they got 242. Pittsburgh wide receiver Kanata Mumfield got a negative 48, so they said he pretty much was not going drafted. Like I said, you can draft whoever you want in the seventh round. That's just the way it is. So, what do you take away from this video? Because it's a long one. Well, what you should take away is this, right? You should take away that just because a team reaches, just because a team gets good value, and just because a team has a player that goes right in the spot where he's supposed to be according to consensus boards, does not really mean anything. And here's why. Because the Rams, the most starts in the Sean McVay, Les Snead era for Rams draft picks. Cooper Kupp had 89 starts and was a third-round pick with a 0, meaning he was drafted where he was supposed to be drafted. But when you say that, that's not necessarily saying anything other than, yeah, they picked him where we had him, but the consensus boards were wrong because he wasn't the 69th overall player. He ended up being one of the best players in the entire draft. He ended up winning the Triple Crown, the Super Bowl MVP. He was the best receiver in the league when healthy. So, with that said, I don't agree with that. And then John Johnson had a negative 34. They were saying this guy wasn't even a third-round pick. He goes on to start 57 games, the second most in the Rams, the McVay and Snead era. Taylor Rapp, they had a plus 24 on. He ends up starting 48 games. He's a second-round pick. Like, that's great, whatever. Jordan Fuller, they gave him a negative 58. They had him 58 spots lower than where the Rams drafted him. He started 46 games, the fourth most in Sean McVay and Les Snead Rams history among draft picks. Fifth was David Edwards, a fifth-round pick who had a plus 47. It's all over the place. There's nothing here that's going to tell you one way or another. The Rams had a good draft the year that they had a negative 331 cumulative value in 2023. They had a really good draft. I think back-to-back A-plus drafts, a plus 134. Really what it goes to show you is that all this stuff here, what you often find is that while there's a lot of individualism that needs to be explained because not everybody is in the same position and so forth, but you find that a lot of these consensus boards, They have guys ranked a lot lower, and they have guys ranked a lot higher. Ewan Price had a plus 56. They ranked Samson Ebukam a negative 74. Ebukam is a good player in this league, and he had a significant role for the Rams. Ewan Price barely played one game. Great value for John Kelly, right? Bad value for Sebastian Joseph Day. I mean, who would you rather have, right? And then they got it right with David Edwards, great value, but they got it wrong with Nick Scott. Now, to be fair, if Nick Scott went anywhere else, does he have the success he did? Maybe not. I don't know. Terrell Lewis, great value, right? You see what I'm saying? That's the thing. You can't just look at it and take it for what it is. Zach Evans was the best value pick in 2023, according to them, but he was one of the worst picks in that draft. Now, at the time, it looked great. It looked great at the time, but Puka Nacua was the best draft value, and they had a negative on him. So what I mean to say is this. I appreciate Jack Lichtenstein for putting this all together. I think and I'll put the link in the description below so you guys can check it out. I think having this stuff, the cumulative grades, all this is so fascinating to me. But it is a reminder. The Rams have been one of the best teams in the National Football League since McVay took over as the head coach in 2017. Now, in some of those draft classes, they haven't drafted well according to this cumulative rating. The consensus boards would say the Rams reached on every single draft by a lot until 2024. That was the only positive where they didn't reach. What I will say is I noticed a pattern here because the Rams used to draft small school prospects, right? They did. Think about this. In 2022, they took a Montana State edge defender. They took South Carolina State cornerback. The year prior, they took a guy out of Concordia St. Paul. They took a guy out of Central Arkansas. And then before that, they took guys from the usual schools. They had a Stephen F. Austin in there, but for the most part, they were taking them out of power schools. So I think they went with some small school guys. Of course, they had Eastern Washington, two of them, that 2017 class. But since Concordia St. Paul, they have really gone more big schools. And that's just the way it's worked out. I'm not saying that they're against the small schools, but look, 2025, Oregon, Michigan, Auburn, Ohio State, Ole Miss, Pittsburgh. Those aren't small schools. How about 2024? Florida State, Michigan, Miami, Clemson, Washington State, Stanford, Texas, Arkansas, Kansas State. They took Wingate punter Ethan Evans, but aside from that, TCU, Tennessee, Wake Forest, Georgia, Appalachian State, to be fair. Then you got Georgia, Clemson, BYU, Nebraska, TCU, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Toledo. Toledo's a little smaller. Before that, you had Florida State, Florida, Alabama, Utah, Purdue, Ohio State, Baylor, Miami, Clemson. And then before that, you had Washington, Memphis, Michigan, Oklahoma, Washington, Wisconsin, Penn State, Texas Tech. And then before that, if you don't include Stephen F. Austin and Maine, you got TCU, Michigan State, Virginia, Oklahoma, Tennessee, Rutgers, Louisville, SMU, and TCU. And then in 2017, this was interesting because they had South Alabama, they had Eastern Washington twice, they had Tulane, who wasn't as big as they are now, Pittsburgh, Virginia, Boston College, Texas A&M. So I think over the course of time, the Rams have definitely changed their archetypes. They've changed the schools that they really prefer. We call them pipelines. There's a reason why the Eagles are comfortable drafting all the Georgia Bulldogs. That's one of the best programs. Kirby Smart runs a really tight ship. So the Eagles feel comfortable with that. The Rams have had pipelines. The Big Ten with the offensive linemen. They're getting a lot of SEC guys lately, a lot of Michigan guys, right? So it's something to keep in mind. But I think when you look at the cumulative consensus board, I think you can learn that it's a cool thing to have, but there's no way. The thing you should take away from this is there's no way with the draft, and this is why it is so difficult to nail it. There's no way to know because there's all these different individuals that have different lifestyles, that are put in different roles, different coaches, different systems, schemes, different situations. Some are asked to start right away, some are not. Some are supposed to start right away because their ceiling isn't that high. And then when they come out to play and they finally get a chance, the team finally realizes, oh, the ceiling wasn't that high. They're just as good as they were in college. They haven't really taken the next step. Then some guys, they play right away and their ceiling's high, but they have a really low floor. So then by the time that their ceiling starts kicking in, they've already been benched because their floor was so low that they lost their job. So what it comes down to is that there is no perfect process. There's no model. There's no analytics. There's no AI. There's none of it that can correctly tell you who is going to pan out and who is not. The only pattern that I noticed is that a lot of the guys that they really slept on value-wise ended up being pretty key contributors for the Rams. Again, I'm talking Jordan Fuller, -58. I'm talking John Johnson, -32. I'm talking Sebastian Joseph Day, -52. -74, Samson Ebukam, right? -15, Kobe Durant. So, -98, Brian Allen. -254, Ethan Evans. A lot of those negative consensus guys that the Rams reached on ended up being important. I trust the Rams. At the end of the day, I think they really crushed this draft because they had a completely different objective. They only had 6 picks. And the reason they only had 6 picks is because they drafted 24 players the last 2 years. And their roster's strong. And they're not one of those teams that recycles players. When you're on the Rams being drafted this year, if you were drafted in 2022 or 2023, you have value on this roster if you're still on it. Warren McClendon Jr. from 2023, they want to keep developing him. It's that simple, right? Guys like that. And so, yeah, I want you to take that away. But that's going to do it for me. So I hope you guys enjoyed this study. I know it was a long video, but I really felt like it was overdue. And again, I loved having these, like, having this at my fingertips and being able to find this and come across it, the big board, the consensus big board. It's not hate on people that make those, but it is a reminder when we say they reached, these people, and I say it, you say it, we all say it, but these people, they have so many resources where you talk about the Wingate punter Ethan Evans, you have Chase Blackburn at Wingate meeting with him. They know more about the person. There's probably plenty of players that rank higher on their board, but they don't fit their culture. Good teams vet. The bad teams are the ones that ignore the culture thing. Then they end up with a player that they draft over other players. That player gets suspended, and in that spot, they don't have the player that they could have gotten. So those are my thoughts. Let me know in the comment section what you guys think. I'm very curious to see. Hope you guys watch the full thing, but that's going to do it. I'll see you guys soon. Later, folks. All right, guys. So once again, just want to let you guys know that you can check out my new side project, The Lounge. I interview athletes, musicians, actors, actresses, all the 9. So definitely check it out over on the Lounge with Jake Ellenbogen channel. Be sure to subscribe and enjoy. In case you guys haven't noticed, I do have a Discord channel for my community on this channel. And if you want to be a part of it, it is free. The link is in the description below. You can sign up. This is basically a 24/7 Rams channel, and we are almost at 1,100 members. So if you want to be a part of it, just hit the link in the description below.